Let's bring in my guests to discuss the leadership transition at Afreximbank and, in particular, the focus of the Trade Finance Bank on energy and mineral sectors in Africa, as outlined in the inaugural address of Dr. George Elombi, the new president of the Cairo-based bank. Welcome, Ayuk, the executive chairman at the African Energy Chamber in Johannesburg. It's great to see you again. Good evening, sir. I'm happy you have a safe travels back to South Africa from the weekend Cairo event.
Thank you so much for having me on Boston. I think it has been a tremendous asset to be, first of all, be in Cairo and at the Afrexim event. I think we just witnessed something that is rare in Africa, transition of power, but again, it came from an African institution, from one board leader to another.
Interesting. Now, you were there for the entire event over the weekend, in and out of the event hall, and of course, I'm sure there were a couple of talks. I mean, at your level, at executive level, in the dinner room, in the corridors, and all of that. Give me your thoughts around what the new Afreximbank's President George Elombi outlined as his 7-point agenda, in particular for the Africa's critical mineral sector. And I took note of that, and I'm sure you didn't miss that in his address.
Oh, I didn't. But both, if you permit me, let me start with this. Africa just saw a transition from a tried, true, and tested leader in Professor Benedict Arama. He is a legend. He's somebody that came from the heart and soul of Nigeria and got put in the soul of Africa. He spoke from the heart. He made promises. He kept them. But what was more important, this man took Africa to the world. When every time Africa called on him, he said, "Send me." He elevated an African institution to be the pride of the world and really made Africans proud. And I think looking at everybody in Cairo, it reflected on that. President, kings and queens, captains of the industry, but Africa was proud that Africa's own son from nowhere else but Nigeria could have really championed this, and that is what I think that transition meant to many people. Now to Dr. George Elombi, he is going to be outstanding. I think he comes from the institution, he understood it, he understands that this institution needs to go forward. He is from the street. He is not somebody that comes from the elites or very rich. He came from nothing to something. I listened carefully to his plan around critical minerals, and it was bold. It was the first time you saw an African leader basically say, we are going to process those minerals here in Africa. We're not going to finance for you to take these minerals outside and beneficiate them outside and send us finished products. We're going to build a value chain for Africa's minerals within this continent and drive that forward. And also, he touched on issues like visas, intra-African trade. Those kind of things already shows a leader with a vision in his own mind, but a leader also that really looks at ethics and compliance and is really going to be bent on ensuring that his 7-point agenda really comes to fruition. And all of Africa needs to stand behind this man the way we stood with Professor Arama to drive our continent forward.
Why is the focus, NJ, do you think the focus for Elombi on the extractive industry very important for Africa at the moment, with Elombi pledging in that inaugural address, a new sector-focused intervention fund for the continent, which perhaps sounds a little bit to me like the African Energy Bank?
I think that's going to be very important. You know, the African Energy, my good friend and brother, Dr. Omar Farouk, was in Cairo. We need to get the African Energy Bank, and we need to move fast. Dr. Elombi recognize that our energy sector is underfunded, and because it's underfunded, our continent still remains the most underexplored and underproduced continent. A lot of critical assets around pipelines, energy infrastructure, a lot of producing assets or driving gas and developing new fields have not been done because of lack of funding coming, especially when we've relied a lot on funding coming from global multilateral institutions that they can fund natural gas in Europe, but they wouldn't fund in Africa. They can fund in many Western countries, but they wouldn't touch us. I think Dr. Elombi's vision on driving that intervention fund to really see how we bridge and drive intra-Africa trade finance refineries like Dangote refineries redoubling their efforts and really guarantee us our own energy security right on the money, right on point. We just need to get the politicians to back him up and get that out of the way because they know how to find the money, they know how to raise the money, they know how to execute. I think the last 10 years of Professor Rama shows that they are a bank that can get the job done. We need to back him every step of the way and encourage him to get this intervention fund done, and we need it now more than ever.
Yes, so you're just touching on the Orama's legacies, Orama's 10 years, those massive support. Review for me very briefly, NJ, the critical support the Afreximbank has provided the oil and gas sector. You talk about the Dangote refinery. You heard Elombi says that, look, the Dangote refinery is looking for additional $5 billion to expand that facility in Lagos to 1.4 million barrels per day. And I'm sure there's still a whole lot more oil and gas being found virtually every day and night across the African continent, all across the continent, as it were. So how much more work do you think is there for Afreximbank to support this time, not just oil and gas, but also for critical minerals as well?
I think it's about energy, right? Because, you know, I've always said it, 600 million, no access to electricity. Yes. 900 million, no access to clean cooking. Guess what's going to happen? At a time when nobody wanted to touch oil and gas because of ESG rules coming from Western countries, at a time when everybody said, leave it in the ground, don't touch Africa oil, African entrepreneurs in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Angola, everywhere across the continent, they were having a difficult job. Even African oil traders could not even find the facilities for them to trade and guarantee our own energy security and get things like LPG into villages and small markets. Afreximbank defied the odds. And this is what makes Professor Rama great together with Josh Elombi. They stood together as a team, president, vice president at that time. They worked on backing this industry, but they didn't just do that with looking for finance. I remember being in COP. Who do I see next to me? I see Professor Rama standing up for Africa. I remember being in big meetings across Europe and many wealthy Western countries. In Portugal, we went to meet the president. Professor Rama took me along. He went there defending Africa's energy sector, not just in words, but they went out there to look for money and they put money behind it. And I mean, you got so many African billionaires and African multimillionaires getting their way up because Afreximbank came in there and backed them up. That's the power, not just money, but advocacy and also finding ways to use the rules that have been stacked against us to make it work for us. And who would have thought when we started the Africa Energy Week, do you know what? Afrexim was one of our first supporters. Professor Rama stood with us, George Elombi and the entire team, and they backed Africa Energy Week, and we just the most beautiful conference you have in Africa today, thanks to Afreximbank. And I think that they mean it when they say that they would stand with Africa's energy sector, Africa's oil and gas sector. I have 100% confidence in what Dr. Elombi would do, and we need to continue hoping that they'll take it to the next level, especially on the Dangote refinery.
Okay, so where we are, what should be the Africa's playbook regarding its energy relationship with Russia? As we see, U.S. putting pressure on Moscow with sanctions on oil trade. Rosneft, for example, Lukoil that do business in Ghana, in Kenya, and elsewhere on the continent. How do you think Africa should deal with this, with the new shift that we're seeing, globally speaking, geopolitics?
You know, they always say when the Western countries have a recession, African countries have a depression. This is not our fight, and we've always maintained that. We want to see global stability in oil markets. We want to see global peace, but also we have to be very careful as Africans is to follow exactly what Nelson Mandela taught us. Your enemies don't have to be our enemies. enemies. So we have to be very careful not to get caught up in their mess. What you see happening over there in Ukraine and Russia, it's a tribal war, and Africans know a lot what tribal wars can do to hurt us in our side. It could lead to something else. We just have to keep focus on an African first energy strategy. Whoever comes in with goodwill in our continent puts money to get our people out of energy poverty, put money to get our people out of poverty so that they don't have to cross the street to go to Europe. We work with them. We are non-aligned with anybody. And I think, as you've known my work with the African Energy Chamber, I have maintained a strict non-aligned position. And I think that position stays, and we will work with everybody that comes for the good of Africa and wants to work with us. And we are not going to get caught up in tribal wars that they have out there in Europe. We don't understand what the problem is, and we will not be part of it.
Okay, so here we are for the African Energy Week, just recently concluded in Cape Town, South Africa. Give me your takeaways, in particular, to those relations with OPEC, for example. There was an inverse relationship with OPEC. There was one with Russia. We got with the United States and a few other blocs. Talk to me about these powerful blocs, globally speaking, that were brought together to that particular event. What are the key takeaways?
I think our non-aligned energy process really works. We had Russia, we had the US, we had China, we had the Middle East, we had people from everywhere looking at Africa. But you know what was most important? We had Africans looking at Africa, and it worked really well. The United States sent one of the biggest delegations to Africa Energy Week with different sectors of their government to really engage with African leaders. So many closed-door meetings, so many one-on-one meetings, bilaterals, but also, you know what I love the most? A lot of deals were signed. We came out with multi-billion-dollar deals being signed to revive projects that you will see going on in Nigeria, in Equatorial Guinea. Commitments went into Angola, more commitment went into Mozambique, and even countries like Namibia are going to see more. So we like where we go to the African Energy Week. It is an African energy movement, and we're going to continue driving that. What is most important is that we look at Africa and we say we're going to do something world-class that the world has never seen. We don't compete with Africa anymore. We go in planetarily, we go planet-wise, so we go up there to compete with the best, and who else could have beat that but to see Africans bringing African excellence at the best. We understand one thing, that we are going to continue pushing for financing, because that is the key to unlock these resources and get us where we want to get, because Superman is not coming, Batman is not coming, Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. So a lot of the stuff is going to be done by us Africans to drive that, create an enabling environment so investments can flow in, and we really need to get it done. But we need to back African entrepreneurs bigly, and that's what we're going to focus on working at the Energy Chamber, backing African entrepreneurs and backing the oil and gas sector to do just what it does best, and put Africa on the pace that we can also win the AI challenge. We don't think we should take a backseat on AI. Get electricity, get data centers. Let's go and get young Africans to be the leaders on AI.
Very interesting. As we begin to wind down this conversation, talk to me about the outlook on the African Energy Chamber for the continent's energy sector 2026. And of course, we've got that latest report. Today, we've got the news that Nigeria's group managing director, the managing director of the NLNG, Philip, has now been appointed as the new Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. I saw your post on LinkedIn earlier today congratulating him.
Philip is an amazing guy, brilliant, intelligent, just one of the best we have. It's like around my leaves, now we got Philip coming into his international organizations. It looks like Nigeria always has some kind of portrait of sending out great people to international places. We love that. I love Nigeria. Really amazing people I've seen. Philip is going to do something just marvelous at Gas Exporting Countries Forum. You know why? From his time in Trinidad, going right back to training with Nigerian LNG, they've turned out profits. He understands that, but here's what's even more important. He understands the role of natural gas to get Africa industrialized and get our people out of energy poverty. He's going to be a great spokesperson from the industry. We've worked with the previous Secretary General Hamel, that was an amazing human being, supported us. I think Philip is just going to take us to the next level. And the Africa oil and gas industry is going to be resilient in 2026. There's going to be shocks, there's going to be some difficult times, but I think our fundamentals are strong, and we're going to see a lot more movement in our energy sector. We just got to get our politicians to be more pragmatic, proactive, and use common sense and exercise some of their powers with caution and push up the industry to do what it does best.
Very great. Thank you. And of course, thank you so much for standing with us. I'm sure you've always been there for Nigerian big names in the energy sector, including the former OPEC Secretary General, your very dear friend, the late, sorry, I just lost that in my head. Mohammed
What a
Bakindo.
great,
Yes,
dynamite human being.
Yes,
dynamite human being. We miss him.
Yes, we missed him. But thank you so much. Thank you as always for those in-depth analysis and viewpoints. Thank you. We appreciate it and wish you a very great evening there in Johannesburg. Thank you so much. NG Ayuk, the Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber.